Good morning, everybody here and at home. I welcome you on behalf of Creation Justice Ministry to a presentation of green burial practices. Now, this may not be a topic that you would talk about very openly with anybody, but it's an important one, especially for your survivors to be able to indicate before you leave this life what you would like to have done with your body. So we're fortunate today to have a representative from Natural Funeral, Seth Vidal, with us today to talk about how we can ecological and holistic ways to take care of your body after you leave. Colorado is one of the states that does provide us with several choices. And so Seth will be talking to us about water cremation, body composting, and reverent body care in hopes of demystifying the choices for our final footprint to be healing for people and greener for our planet. Seth, we welcome you.
Okay, thank you, Pam, for that introduction and Rush, and thank you to the church community for allowing us to have a little bit of conversational time with you today. I appreciate that Pam acknowledged that this is not a conversation that all of us, that some of us ever get around to having. In fact, a lot of calls that we receive at our funeral home, and we get to serve about 250 to 300 families a year. And a lot of those calls come in from people who have not made plans. And sometimes, of course, we deal with sudden losses that were unexpected. And so I'm glad that you all have chosen to lean in today to this conversation about a service that we're all going to eventually encounter, whether we plan for it or not. And what we do find is that when people have had an opportunity to really curate their ideas about what's meaningful to them in life, we can put together a plan that matches their values in death. And when we don't plan for that, we kind of get what our survivors think we might have wanted, or we might get something that doesn't match what we ultimately would have selected had we had our eyes on the topic. So thanks for putting your eyes and your ears and your hearts on this topic today. And I'm going to start a slideshow here. In fact, would you show me where that is? Perfect. All right, thank you. So I'm going to start and I'm going to try and cover a lot of topics, some of which I acknowledge you likely have not even heard of. We do all of the things that a funeral home does, with a few exceptions. We don't embalm, and we don't focus on cosmetic. Cosmetics is not a focus of the natural funeral. The natural funeral's focus is on empowering families to have a service and to have a form of disposition, and whatever it means to encounter their death, we want to advocate so that families can get what they want. And that means really diverse things. It means in-home vigils and wakes where we have people at rest in their home for a day or several days following their deaths. It means working with different spiritual communities all over the state, different cemeteries all over the state. But we start with a desire to say yes to what the client's request might be. The other thing that informs our service is ecology. It's important to us. If all things are equal, how can we meet your needs in a way that takes into account the environment and future generations? And so resource consumptions, and impacts to the planet and to nature or considerations. And then lastly, we focus on, I would say, we don't have a spiritual or a religious affiliation at the funeral home. In fact, myself and my two partners, we all come from diverse wisdom traditions, and we all each encounter the realm of spirit differently. But we intersect at a place that the natural funeral is able to accommodate for everyone's wishes. So we treat people as they need to be seen and they need to be heard. And we don't look like a conventional mortuary. We wear earth tones and light colors, and I won't greet you at the door in a black three-piece suit and shake your hand and say, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm going to greet you at the door and say, thank you for allowing me to serve you at this very important moment. And how can we construct something that's meaningful to you and your family? We are about an earth and nature defined light, and that's how we'd like to serve in the world. So I'm going to actually take us on a quick tour. In this presentation, I have 3 really short videos. None of them is longer than about 1.5 minutes. And the first one is actually a tour of our home. And it's just to give you an example of, it won't look and feel like a conventional mortuary. It looks like something a little bit different. Our main funeral home is located in Lafayette, which is in Boulder County, and we serve the entire state of Colorado. But so I'm going to go ahead and take you on that tour now. So that was just a way for you to have a glimpse into our facility in Boulder County without having to make the commute. And what we wanted to show in that video is there are some funerary support items, urns and caskets and candles and art, and everything that is associated with us is curated from within our community. So we don't sell an urn or casket or even a candle that's made more than 30 miles from where our facility is located. And we know all of the artists who make these things. And so it's just another holistic approach that the natural funeral takes to serving our clients. We have a lending library. We have a chapel at our facility there that's actually the coach house in our funeral home is a home built in 1903, was lived in for 115 years by families before we converted it into a funeral home. And so everything about it feels light and uplifting. And Yeah, that was just a glimpse into it. The next thing that I might focus on would be some of the, oops, I'm sorry. Skip screen. There we go. Next, I told you that the Natural Funeral does all of the services of a funeral home with a couple of exceptions. And those exceptions are really focused around, we don't sell a lot of things. Our focus is on service, and our focus is on how we're going to walk through a plan that was created with your family together. And we start that with our receipt of yours or your loved one's body. And so in a conventional funeral home system, at the point of death, a person is dispatched to collect the body. And then a day or two or three pass while that body might be embalmed or prepared for a viewing. And that funeral home might take a picture of your loved one and do their best to create some representation that looks a semblance of that. We find that inadvertently omits an opportunity for loving, healing, and engagement with the family. And so while we don't guarantee the outcome emotionally to each person who enters this event of reverent body care, we've seen some profound experiences. And what reverent body care is an invitation of the family to participate in that last act of washing, dressing, and anointing the loved one. And reverent body care is something that we do at our facility in our chapel with families, or we do it in families' homes. So often our first call to respond to a death, perhaps there was a person who died at home on hospice, and instead of coming and bringing that person immediately into our care, we arrive with cloths and oils and fragrance and candles, and we walk through I would call it a ritual, which is acknowledging the transformation that's before us right now. And then we lead with families something that is a ritualistic washing of the body. And it's not at all about washing the body for cleanliness. It's about a last act of love with this body and with this vessel of a beloved, where we're acknowledging the vessel has completed its journey. And rather than outsourcing that act to someone else, we find it is profound when families engage with the feet of their beloved, and together, as we're washing the feet for the last time, we're talking about, where have these feet traveled? Where have they been in service and in love on this planet? What acts did they carry out on their journey? And we get to the hands, and we're together with the family washing the hands. And of curiosity to us and of joy to the situation is a conversation about who those hands have hugged and held. And so as we're washing the body with the family, we're engaging in this conversation. It's a very sacred conversation, regardless of the spiritual focus of the people in the room. And lots of people bring their spirituality into this moment, rightfully so. And we help to be that container. So it's something that is a participatory act. It is not at all required. I would say about half of our clients choose this, though. And of that of the half that choose it, about 75% do it at our center, and about 25% do it in their homes. But this is generally a beautiful experience, and it's something that I would say, of any service we provide, we get the most direct experiential feedback about what this meant to families. And we do this with sudden loss clients who've died with a traumatic death. So people who died in an automobile accident. Without embalming, we keep the body in a natural state, and we focus on parts of the body that are the most approachable and within reach to the family during that moment. So we've done this hundreds of times and we have hundreds of beautiful stories, many of which are shared on our website in video form and in testimonial form. So I want to share a little bit about Reverent Body Care, because you're not going to find something like that at a conventional mortuary. It's just our touch. This is a brief video about Reverent Body Care.
Our friends and the natural helpers were there to prepare his body, anointing him with natural oils, and even instructed me how to do that. It gave me more time to adjust and accept his death, and to touch him and to be with him. And that, I think, was very beneficial in my healing process. Jake was treated in a loving and honoring way. That whole week was so impactful and so powerful for both my husband and I, and for our older son, James. We would have never have done it had Natural Funeral not been there to direct us and to lead us down that path.
So as I entered the room, and Rush and I were talking earlier, and there's a noticeable trend of the diminishment of funerals in the country right now. There's a diminishment of burials, and people are instead opting for cremations. And there are fewer and fewer graveside services or church services. And what we find is sometimes our act of Reverent Body Care, where we do this very intimate act of service with a family, we might begin with a small circle, and then once we've washed and dressed and anointed and laid that person out, then additional friends and family come. And we're actually seeing the trend where these smaller, more intimate gatherings with the body present are quite replacing a lot of big services and memorial events. And maybe people are choosing to do those after the fact. Maybe they're choosing to do it after the pandemic, or after family and friends can travel from out of town. But people, this never looks the same with any two families. It's just a profound opportunity to create a really special experience. So that's a service point about the natural funeral that is really unique to us, and it integrates what's important to families. And so from here, I want to shift the conversation a bit into what people are choosing to do with their bodies when they die. And that too is shifting over time. And Rush, again, and I were talking about the rates of cremation being on the rise. And that's for lots of reasons. Cost, it's typically less expensive than a full burial with a casket and a plot. But also people perceive it as having less of a lasting impact on the environment, where they don't necessarily want to take up a space on the ground with a marker in perpetuity. and have that ground, you know, watered or maintained. And so people are looking to other options. And cremation really, it was first offered in the country back in the 1880s, and it was protested, and lots of groups didn't accept it as being something that they could integrate. And now it's the foremost form of disposition of human bodies in our country. In Colorado, the number's around 70% of people who choose cremation. And back in the 1970s, that number was only 5%. Where I traveled from, Boulder County, that number's 91% of people who are selecting cremation. So I want to talk with you about I did it again. I want to talk with you about, there are four main options that the natural funeral presents when it comes to what we're going to do with our bodies. And the first option is burial. And I just want to take a moment to highlight the difference between a conventional burial and a green burial. And there are lots of things that come in between. So a conventional burial usually has an embalmed body in a casket in a vault, or a vault is also sometimes called a grave liner. And the purpose of that structure is to keep it so that as our body and as our casket decompose over time, that the earth does not sink in where that decomposition has occurred. And so an outer burial container made out of cement and rebar is usually placed on the outside of a coffin. Some cemeteries require these steps and some do not. We work with every cemetery in the state. A lot of families come to us and they say, we've already got plots over here. And so we, of course, serve them in that cemetery, regardless of what the rules of the cemetery are. If they must have a casket, we use a casket and we provide it. Our caskets, as I have already told you, are made in Longmont. They're about 15 miles from our office, and they're plain wooden beetle-killed pine caskets. And so we can accommodate that. And if they must use an outer burial vault, what will typically, does everybody, have you heard of the concept of a vault that goes on the outside of a casket? It's kind of a box. And if you think of a shoebox without a lid, that's placed into a grave first, and the casket's placed inside that, and then a lid is placed on the top. Well, where cemeteries require vaults, we say, well, we'll just place the body directly onto the ground, and then we'll take the vault and we'll install it in an inverted fashion. So save the resources of the lid. We're not going to buy that. We'll still spare your cemetery having a nice flat lawn, and we're just going to use the vault inverted. And so we've actually got a trend of cemeteries in the state who had not heard of that and are now saying, well, sure, we can do that. And so we're helping to maybe green some cemeteries in the state. But an additional offering that we have is kind of disappointed with the options that we found as we sought resources in the community for green burials. We didn't find exactly what we were looking for, and buying a cemetery is a little bit out of our reach right now. But what we did do is we bought a quarter of a section of the Lyons Municipal Cemetery. Lyons is a little bitty town in between Boulder and Estes Park, and it has a beautiful mountain cemetery that dates back also to the 1880s. And we bought a bunch of plots from them, and the stipulation is we don't have to use vaults, we don't have to use caskets. We dig our graves to a depth of 3.5 feet instead of 6 feet. And that allows grasses and topsoil. It allows the plants that have roots that can reach 3 feet, but not 6 feet, to have access to the nutrients within ourselves. And so they agreed. And so we've opened a natural burial, natural funeral section at the Lions Cemetery. But like I said, we work with other cemeteries, and this option of burial is not going away anytime soon. The next option, well, this is just I'm sorry, this is more on burial. This is actually a picture of a natural funeral burial at our Lions Cemetery. And you can see there, it's just demonstrating a focus on, there's not a focus on the products and the casket. The focus is on the service at hand. And this was just a beautiful service with a willow carrier used, and the body here was shrouded in an organic cotton cloth, and we hand lowered this body into the grave using 6 ropes off of that willow carrier, and that's sort of our standard procedure for a burial.
So no casket.
No casket is required whatsoever. We sell caskets. They're $1,200. There's not a high, medium, and low. They're $1,200. They're made out of beetle kill pine, and they're constructed in Longmont. And we keep certain sizes in our inventory for unexpected deaths. But if a person is going on hospice and we know that they want to be buried, then we'll measure that prayer. Let's say they're 6'1" like I am. We build the casket to be 6'5", because when I die, my toes will probably relax a little bit. And so we build the casket to the body so that there's not materials when we can. So another option, and this is the type of cremation that most people are the most familiar with, flame cremation. That's where our body is placed into something. In this case, this cardboard box is the simplest, sort of plainest, least consumption of resources that we can begin this process with. The state requires our body to be in a container at the beginning of a cremation process. And so that's a photo of a retort, and this is what a standard flame cremation looks like at the beginning. That box is, slid into that device, and over the course of about 2 hours, the body's reduced to bone. And then that bone is further reduced into a powder that people would think of as cremains. And that can be returned in an urn, and people scatter that or put it in a cemetery, or inurn it at a church, or put it on the mantle, or whatever they choose to do. And we offer this. For it because it's the least expensive option. It's within reach for folks. And we do our best in cases of cremation to make that ecological too. So we have conversations with families about, well, in the viewing, we'll have on the suit and the shoes and the belt. But prior to the cremation, what if we take off the leather shoes? Because we don't really want to spend our energy incinerating those. What if we take off the leather belt? And what if we just donate those rather than have them, consumed in this process? And burning leather and rubber-soled shoes it's not good for the planet. And so we enter those conversations with folks, and we always find a receptivity to a plan like that. So burial and flame cremation are by far in the state and in the nation the most common choice with their bodies. There are 2 emerging forms, which I'm about to talk about. And the Natural Funeral is really proud to offer both of these. And we're the first in the state of Colorado to offer both of these. In August of 2019, the Natural Funeral used a water cremation process with the first person in the state of Colorado. And since we've performed this particular water cremation process about 250 additional times. The water process takes place in a tub about the size of a bathtub. It's about 2 feet wide by about 2 feet deep by 7 feet long. And we begin the process by gently placing into this vessel. And then we add 12 gallons of warm water and 2 high pH or alkaline chemicals. And those chemicals are naturally derived in the environment. And then over the course of about the next 2.5 hours, the body is rocked inside this tub. And the actual pattern is that the vessel rocks 3 degrees down one way, and then on a 15-second timer, the vessel rocks 3 degrees down the other way. And what that does is it creates a wave flow or a limnoscape pattern of water flow across the body. And in that 2 to 2.5 hours, the body is converted into a liquid form. And so inside of the vessel, what we're left with are the bones and the liquid. And we take the bones the same as we would with a flame cremation process, and we reduce them to a powder, and we return them to families for the same things that they would do for any cremation. They put that in an urn and bury or scatter or memorialize. And then the other thing that happens in this vessel is that the content of the soft tissue of our body, everything else that's not our bones, is converted into a liquid which is chock full of biostimulants. So over the course of our lives, we've built our bodies we've grown our bodies out of the nutrients that we've taken in and energy, and we've spent a lifetime curating these vessels, and they're chock full of elemental things: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, a little boron, a little iron. And the list actually reads, what are the building blocks of life? The main things in us, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, are the building blocks of plant life. And so we take this liquid and we donate it to farms. We put it in containers and we truck it to farms in Denver and the Boulder County area. And it's used to grow flowers, to grow trees, to grow alfalfa, to grow brome grasses, and to rehabilitate soil or land that's been overgrazed or overfarmed. People will spread this liquid biostimulant over a large piece of land. And we've got teams of people who have done this. So we have experiential farmers who have witnessed the gains that they've seen in the growth ability of their land. And we have scientists from CSU who've studied this, and it's something that is gaining in momentum and popularity. It's not for everyone. It's an outlier now in terms of, what people are. But at the natural funeral, it's not. Where in the country, this represents less than 1% of people choosing this. In fact, water cremation is only legal in 20 of the 50 states right now. So, I'm telling you that at the natural funeral, we're not seeing this in the 1%. We're seeing this in the 40 to 50% of our clients are selecting this. So that I think I may actually have I do have a short video that I'm going to play about this.
Water cremation very well with her
The low carbon footprint of water cremation really appealed to me as a scientist, as a research meteorologist, because I'm well aware of the problems with our changing climate due to burning fossil fuels. Doug died very suddenly and unexpectedly, but I was very comforted that the natural funeral was here. Doug composted everything he gardened in the summer, and so to be able to return the remains of his body basically in the form of a fertilizer that would nourish the soil was really a blessing. It's a loving of life and an affirmation of life, even in the midst of a death.
Those were, I don't get to know except every so often. Those families are so special. They're treasured memories of mine, and people who connected with this process. And so I wanted to make you aware of it, because in emerging ecological offerings, and as we're talking about green burial, this is another option that people are choosing. Now, if that did not blow your hat in the creek, I'm going to talk with you about the newest form of disposition, which is called natural repair. And this was legalized in Colorado after several of lobbying at the state level to bring this offering to clients. And our firm, we've sent 5 people, and we testified before the Energy and Environment Subcommittee about this option, which eventually passed, became law September. And on September 22nd of this year, we laid in the first person into a vessel in the state of Colorado for the composting process. So this has been done in the state of Colorado 3 times. So I mean, it's brand new. Colorado is only the second state to allow this form of disposition. Washington State began in December of 2019 to offer this, and they have 3 firms that have currently begun offering this in Washington State. And to the best of our knowledge, we're the only one who are now offering it in Colorado. And I'm actually friends with all the founders of all 3 of the firms who offer this in Washington State. And as we for it here, not lobbying so much as testifying for it here, we've gone and visited each of the firms that have done various implementations in Washington State to land on how we wanted to bring this offering to clients. And so this photograph here of the vessel that we created to perform composting body here at the Natural Funeral. It actually mimics the dimensions of a green burial grave. It's 3 feet by 3 feet deep by 7 feet long. And what we have chosen to is we place in composting. Have you all, maybe you're familiar with putting your watermelon rinds or your banana peels, and after some months you go out and those banana peels are this deep, rich, nutrient dense soil that you can use back in your garden. The technology here is the same. The technology is the same that nature and that we've used agriculturally as long as we've farmed. So like 10,000 years we've been composting. And so we use the ingredients of wood chips, just chipped aged wood, green alfalfa, and straw. And we create a bed for the body in this vessel. And what you see on the right-hand side of the picture is that layered bed with the body would down to the straw in this vessel. And then we reverse the layering. So straw goes by the body, and then alfalfa, and then wood chips. And we close the vessel. And we have air input at the vessel, so we keep it oxygenated. And about every 2 weeks, we roll the vessel. We took repurposed spool wheels to create a 54-inch diameter on the end of this vessel, and then built the centerpiece. And so our process takes 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, when we open the lid of the vessel and we pour this out, we have a dark, rich, earth-giving that our bodies and these other grasses and natural materials have converted into soil. So, like I said, this is really, really new. We just got word yesterday that the 4th person in Colorado that has selected this just died yesterday. And so we'll be laying their body in on Wednesday. So I mean, this is right at the emerging point, Colorado, right? Really in the nation and in the world right now. And we get lots and lots and lots of questions about this. And speaking of which, that's kind of the ending point information I wanted to share with you or at you or however that is felt. And I would love to see if there are any questions prompted, or I know this isn't a topic of death we don't encounter every day, and some of these types of things you hear of less frequently. Yeah.
What then do you do with the remains?
Right. So I can tell you what the first 3 families have selected. The first family has asked for us to give them back specifically, I'm going to give you their specific measurement. They want 4 Home Depot buckets full of soil, and they want us to donate the remainder. And they're going to take those buckets and they're going to put some in an urn and use that as the memorial. And then they're going to put the rest in their garden. And then the second and third families have asked for every single bit of the soil back. And we have a network of farms that I was talking about in Boulder and Denver that currently receive the liquid essence from the water cremation process. And they too have asked, we'll take any of that soil as well. And we've had several cemeteries who've reached out to us and they've said, to have some of that donated to us, and we'll use it in projects around anywhere that could use a boost of nutrient to the life there.
And is it less? Is there less expense in doing? I'm thinking material use.
Yeah.
More ecological.
Yes. So the materials used here are ecological. In fact, I mean, the wood chips we get donated from like tree felling companies that chip wood. They have lots, and what we prefer is actually an aged wood to begin. Like I don't want to start with a green tree. I want to start with a tree branch that's been actively working on its own dying process for a couple of years, because it has some microbial activity that's going to actually contribute to this process. So we naturally source those resources. Let me speak to the costs of these options. And all of this is super transparent on our website. Our full price list is published. Like we believe in people finding the information they want. We're not gatekeepers to our pricing. Our least expensive option is flame cremation. It's $2,200. Our next option, I'll say, is burial, which is $2,900 plus the plot. So maybe it's $2,900 if you already own the plot, but maybe you still have to shop for a plot. Right. So I can't tell you the full cost of burial. I can only tell you our service is $2,900. Then for water cremation, our cost is $3,900. And for natural reduction or composting, our cost is $7,900. And so while these are very simple, easy to source materials, the fact is I'm going to shelter the body in an environmentally controlled, video secure, alarm secured and monitored warehouse for the next 6 months process. So it's not less expensive, even though the technology is not at all expensive. It's about the time that the process takes that the expense comes in. Yeah, so that answers, yeah.
And then also, I got to think that what happens to the tank.
Oh, that's a great question. So the flame cremation is similar to what you would get at lots of funeral homes have these. Lots of, yeah, lots and lots of them have those. And so sure, that it would be like, there's nothing fancy about our retort. The intentionality comes in the conversation about, well, let's take out a pacemaker. Like if you've got a pacemaker, why would we put it through this process and have that send out into the environment? If you've got leather on, why don't we donate it instead of incinerate? So we're kind of the yes and in terms of flame cremation. Our device isn't anything wildly unusual. It's for natural reduction and for water cremation, we're highly specific in the devices we use. And there's a provider of water cremation in the state, and there are many other providers that I know of doing the body composting.
But what happened?
Well, what about the tank?
Oh, so the titanium would composting, and there's a point, and it's one before the process completes, we run all of the soil through a screening process. And in that process, we get shoulder tip replacements, breast implants, pacemakers, elbows and shoulders, and hernia gauze, anything that's inorganic in the body. And we send it for medical recycling. We have a medical recycler that will take the titanium and they'll melt it down and they'll build something new.
You chop it out first.
No.
With flame.
With the flame, the titanium would be incinerated, melt. It'll the flame cremation process is not really gentle. It's two kind of jet afterburners that point downward the body. They run at 1,600 degrees for 2 to 2.5 hours, and nothing really survives that. Yeah. But in water cremation, they're in, like the titanium would be in the vessel with the bone and the liquid. And we would sort out the bone, liquid to be sent to farms, and then take the metal to medical recyclers. Yeah. So we, in water cremation and in body composting, that gets recycled. The bones in which one? In the water, bones, and then we return them in an urn to the family. And the family may scatter them, they may memorialize them somewhere. They're sterile. They're the water cremation process tank. And again, if you think of something the size of a bathtub, the things that would have in it, the bones, which we dry and turn into a powder, back to families. Then the liquid, normally donated all to farms. Some families ask, they like 8 ounces back or 16 ounces back, and they have a ceremony and they take in there and they put it in the garden or they put it on a special tree. And doing that for a long time with flame cremains as well, you know, scattering on their own. And the difference is, if you think about the nutrient content of the bone cremains following a flame cremation, the nutrient content is zero. Like you wouldn't have a log that you put into a campfire. You wouldn't scoop out the campfire ash and go fertilize your garden with it. You'd smother your garden with it because it's inert and it's not life-giving, and all of the nutrients have actually been burned out of it. However, in a water cremation process, the main thing in the bone remains, it's calcium. And so, it's sterile. There's no DNA, there's no pathogen, there's no, it's neutralized to a pH of 7. So it's like pure calcium after a water cremation. Oh, good call. Are there advantages? Oh, wow, great question. So there's a question that somebody asked, are there advantages of body composting over water cremation since it takes longer? So I don't know. You might have a preference for the nutrient content of your body to come back in a solid form of like soil, because in your vision that integrates to your garden in a different way that like receiving back liquid remains might just integrate to your vision differently. There's a cost difference. There is a time difference. I'll share with you a story. The first family that selected this process, I'm required to maintain anonymity of these clients. I'll let you know it was a sudden loss, and it was a particularly young person in their late teens. And so the family selected this option for their child. And the mother looked at me and said, there's something that I appreciate, this transformation not happening at the flip of a switch, because it took me to grow him in my body. And he didn't in this world at the flip of a switch. And the fact that I know that his body is doing this world over a duration as opposed to in an instant is comforting to me. And that's just one story that I'll share from a mother about the duration of the process. I can tell you too that I've sat down with families and I've said, well, this water cremation takes 3 hours and this body composting takes 6 months. And they say, well, that's ridiculous. I don't want to wait 6 months. So it depends on what side of the coin you're looking at. As to whether that duration is appealing or off-putting to you. I hope that answered the question, and if not, please feel free to unmute yourself, because we've gone conversational at this point. On Wednesday, on Tuesday of this week, I'm working with my composting scientists in their facility, which is a 300,000 square foot warehouse, and their specialty in science is composting. And on Wednesday, I'm looking at a 16,000 square foot warehouse in Denver, where we'll be expanding. This is without a doubt. It doesn't matter what you and me think about this. This is taking off. The train has left the station, and I did a nationwide radio news show in Australia 2 weeks ago because they heard about this, and we've never had mass inquiry from all over. We've had people who've signed up for this already from out of state. We've got people in New Jersey who, when they die, we're going to transport them to Colorado because they want this process. And so Colorado's the second state. We have people reaching out to us. How do I make this legal in Texas? Will you come to New York and testify about how this is working? I haven't seen anything that has caught on like this has. And there's something, so to get back to the comparison between how are people perceiving water cremation versus this, and I realize that I get to have this conversation every day, and to most people, they haven't heard of these things. And so it's like one really weird thing to one other really weird thing. and in my mind, I've built these vessels. This person here is named Chris. We named this chrysalis because it sort of does that transformation. Yes. So I'm in this every day in this conversation, and it feels perfectly normal to me. Where was I going? Oh, we've had some people said from a water cremation process, that's reduction by chemistry. Makes sense to me. And this is reduction by biology. So, and we've had people who the different approaches have appealed to them in different ways. So, you know, that the sudden chemistry or the longer duration biology. And those land on people in different ways. So, yeah. Yes. Is included in like every service that we provide. We don't expect for people to drive their loved one deceased to us. I rattled off the cost to you. I really encourage you to look at it, because things like Reverend Body Care and memorials and celebrations of life and things like that we didn't discuss today. But transportation is included, death certificate filing for these things, regardless of the disposition and the return. We deliver back to families in the Denver metro area their death certificates. We hand deliver their cremains. We have a staff, a non-denominational chaplain that we offer to every family, especially those that experience sudden losses or losses of children. So we've got this sort of team of resources that are included in that, in all those things.
I would just say one thing that's kind of interesting to me, and you know, our burial practice in the United States changed with the Civil War. Before the Civil War, most people in the United States, when they died, the body was cleaned at home. The body was usually viewed in the house, and then either in the yard or at the church, and they were buried in a box, keep animals from digging it out. And then when the Civil War came, all these young men were killed far away from home, and the families wanted the bodies back home. And so this process of embalming, which was done, you know, battlefield or off the battlefield, so that the bodies could be preserved and shipped back home to the family. And then that resulted in this whole industry where people weren't, you know, they weren't, the body went home and it was done by an institution, funeral home. So this definitely more of a natural feel to it, like what you know, great-great-grandparents did. So any further questions? Or very much for your attendance, Seth. Thank you very much for being here. So.